The bed is warm. The room is dark. The day ahead is a formless weight, not yet real, but felt as a gathering pressure somewhere behind your eyes. There is a voice, not a voice you hear, but a voice you are that says, simply, stay. It is not lazy. It is not weak. It is deeply, biologically persuasive. It speaks of the virtue of rest, the logic of conservation, the sweet gravity of the immediate world. To move against it feels, in that moment, like a violation of a natural law. This is where we must begin, not with a triumphant leap, but with this friction, this silent, fundamental resistance that lives in the gap between intention and action. If we are to understand the science and, more importantly, the philosophy of building a life of extreme discipline, we must start by acknowledging this friction not as an obstacle to our greatness, but as the very ground upon which greatness is slowly, patiently built. This will not be a short conversation. It cannot be. To distill this into a list of tips, a hack, a 30-second clip of motivational rhetoric, would be to commit the very error we are here to examine, the belief that depth can be rushed, that profound change respects the clock. So, if you are willing, let this be a different kind of space, a slower space. Let this be the equivalent of a long walk with a single, persistent question. The terrain is your own mind. The journey is the understanding of its rules. And the first rule is this: everything meaningful begins with a negotiation of resistance. We live in a culture that venerates the breakthrough but misunderstands the grind. The official story of discipline is a story of conquest. It is the story of the heroic will, a sort of internal cavalry that charges in to subdue the rebellious natives of our baser instincts. We call this willpower. We are told to just do it, to find a reason, love, anger, duty, and use it as a pry bar to lift ourselves from inertia. In the language of neuroscience, this is called top-down control. The conscious, deliberative parts of your brain, the parts that hold your identity and your promises, imposing order on the older, more automatic circuits that govern fatigue, fear, and desire. And this story is true, as far as it goes. It is the mechanism you use when you drag yourself from bed because someone is waiting at the airport. It is the force you apply when you refuse a second drink, or hold your tongue in an argument, or open the textbook instead of the streaming service. It is real, and it is necessary. But if we stop here, we accept a tragic and exhausting model of the self. We internalize a civil war, the commander versus the troop, the spirit versus the flesh. This model frames discipline as a state of perpetual self-overcoming, a life where victory is measured in the suppression of your own nature. You will hear this story everywhere. It is clean, it is dramatic, and it sells. But it is a simplification that, over a lifetime, can turn a soul into a battlefield. So let us gently set that story down. Let us pivot from the myth of conquest to the more subtle, more demanding reality of navigation. For the people who embody extreme discipline not for a week, but for a lifetime do not seem to be perpetually at war. They seem, in a strange way, to have made peace with the war itself. They have become students of the friction. What have they learned? They have learned that the friction itself, that limbic resistance, has a texture, a pattern, a predictable rhythm. It is not a monster to be slain each morning. It is a weather system that rolls through. And they have learned a deeper, almost alchemical secret, that the act of moving through the friction can be reframed. It can be linked, not only to a distant reward, but to an immediate, internal reward. The reward of integrity, the reward of a tiny, private victory. When you see getting out of bed not as the first miserable step toward a difficult day, but as the first concrete evidence of your own agency, that is the win. The day may be long, but you have already proven something to the only audience that truly matters, your own nervous system. This is where a mere mechanism becomes a philosophy. You are no longer overriding yourself. You are fulfilling a promise to yourself. The dopamine release, the potent neurochemical of anticipation and pursuit, begins to shift. It starts to fire not only for the finished project, but for the initiation of the effort. You begin to thread the dopamine from the future, pulling the satisfaction of accomplishment backward in time to illuminate the moment of choice. The delayed gratification is no longer a dry, joyless discipline. It is a current you learn to ride. This requires a profound familiarity with your own interior narrative. You must know the voice of resistance so well that you recognize its first whisper. You must also know, with equal clarity, the quiet glow of the win that follows heeding your deeper intention. What does that win feel like? It is not euphoria. It is a subtle solidity, a quiet alignment, a sense of being integrated, of your actions flowing from your values, rather than battling your instincts. The person who has built extreme discipline is not someone who no longer feels the desire to stay in bed. They are someone who has felt it 1,000 times, and in that feeling has also felt the deeper pull of the person they are choosing to become. They have turned the conflict into a dialogue, but this delicate internal skill exists within a far more volatile and demanding environment. The modern world's relentless assault on your attention and your neurochemistry. Here, we must be ruthlessly honest. Our environment is now engineered to bypass top-down control, to speak directly to those ancient, automatic circuits with unprecedented force. We have created a world of supernormal stimuli, food engineered to hijack reward pathways, information streams that deliver context switching at a rate the human brain did not evolve to handle, digital entertainment that offers a greater density of sensation than anything in natural human experience. This is not a moral panic. It is a physiological observation. When you consume this diet of intensity, you are not simply being entertained. You are training your nervous system. You are teaching your dopamine system what normal looks like. You are raising the threshold required to feel interest, motivation, and satisfaction. The consequence is a terrifying inversion. The pursuit of more stimulation, more optimization, more peak experience can lead you to a state where you are no longer chasing pleasure, but fleeing a pervasive sense of lack. You scroll through social media not because you are deriving joy from it, but because you are seeking a tiny hit of novelty to offset a background hum of understimulation that your own habits created. The compulsive act is an attempt to return to a baseline you have artificially elevated. This is the neurological root of addiction, engaging in a behavior not to feel good, but to stop feeling bad, to simply feel neutral. When your leisure activities become a desperate fight to feel okay, you have lost stewardship of your own inner world. Therefore, a critical, non-negotiable aspect of building discipline in the 21st century is a discipline of subtraction. It is the conscious, deliberate practice of lowering the stimulation threshold. It is the occasional bare workout, with no music, no pre-workout caffeine, no external fuel. It is the walk without a podcast, where the mind must converse with itself or settle into silence. It is the meal that is simple, nourishing, but not designed to blast your reward centers. This is often mistaken for masochism. It is the opposite. It is an act of profound conservation and respect. It is a recalibration. By periodically stripping away the layers of augmented reality, you remind your nervous system of its own innate capacity for generating focus, energy, and satisfaction. You protect your ability to be moved by the ordinary. You ensure that when you do choose to add music to your run, or a beautiful meal to your celebration, It is a genuine enhancement, a layer of joy on a solid foundation, not a required crutch just to make it through. Discipline, then, becomes the curation of your own sensitivity. All of this sophisticated self-regulation, the negotiation with friction, the stewardship of your dopamine pathways, the cultivation of deep, focused rests upon a foundation that is irreducibly biological, the sacred necessity of rest, not just sleep, but deep, rhythmic, cyclical rest. Here, modern science converges with ancient wisdom in a beautiful and humbling way. Learning the actual rewiring of your brain in response to experience is not a single event. It is a two-phase process. The first phase is the trigger, focused attention. When you concentrate deeply on a new skill, a complex idea, a difficult conversation, you release neurotransmitters like acetylcholine, which acts as a kind of highlighter in the brain, marking the neural circuits involved for potential change. This is the phase we glorify, the grind, the effort, the forward center of mass. But the second phase, the phase where the actual rewiring occurs, is one of release, of deep rest. It happens in slow wave sleep, in REM sleep. It also happens, remarkably, in brief, wakeful states of idle repose, what we might call daydreaming, or non-sleep deep rest. During these periods, the brain rehearses what it learned. It replays the normal sequences, often at high speed, strengthening connections, pruning others, integrating the new information into the vast library of the self. This means that the 90-minute study session is only half of the learning. The following 20 minutes of staring out the window, or the short nap, or the night of deep sleep, that is when the learning is embedded. To ignore this is to furiously plant seeds, and then never water them. You are left with the exhaustion of efforts and little of the growth. Our culture's obsession with relentless productivity is thus a neurological error of catastrophic proportions. It severs the essential rhythm. It privileges the trigger and discards the consolidation. The individual who grinds without rest is not building a deeper capacity. They are burning the highlighter without writing the book. They become effective at doing, but not at integrating. They accumulate experiences, but not wisdom. Their knowledge is brittle, superficial, and disconnected. The true superpower, the foundation of sustainable excellence in any field, is not the ability to focus endlessly. It is the ability to modulate your nervous system with intention to engage with fierce concentration, and then to disengage into deliberate rest across the scale of a day, a week, a lifetime. Great athletes know this. They balance intense training with recovery. Great artists know this. They move between periods of furious creation and fallow emptiness. The rhythm itself is the source of resilience. How, then, do we cultivate this foundational rhythm? It begins not with an app or a mantra, but with the most primordial signal of all, light. Your circadian biology is the master clock that sets the tempo for every other process in your body and mind. That morning sunlight in your eyes viewed safely, without staring directly at the sun, is not a wellness hack. It is a fundamental act of synchronization. It triggers a healthy spike in cortisol, setting your alertness for the day. It sets a precise timer for the release of melatonin no less 16 hours later, orchestrating your sleep. It anchors your internal rhythms to the external rhythm of the planet. To neglect this is to try to conduct an orchestra where every musician has a different watch. You can force the music, but it will be dissonant. The stewardship of light continues as the day declines. Minimizing bright light exposure in the evening, especially from screens, is not merely about blocking blue light. It is about signaling to the ancient parts of your brain that the time for solar engagement is over, and the time for internal repair is beginning. You are lowering the curtains on the theatre of the day, allowing the stage crew of your biology to come in and rebuild the sets for tomorrow. This preparation is what allows for the deep, slow-wave sleep that physically restores your body, and the REM sleep that weaves the emotional and narrative threads of your experience into the tapestry of memory. Without this deliberate transition, sleep becomes shallow, fragmented, and ineffective. You may be unconscious, but you are not restoring, and we must speak of nourishment in this context not as fuel for effort alone, but as a signal of safety for rest. The body will not transition easily into the vulnerable, restorative state of sleep if it perceives a state of alarm, severe caloric restriction, or eating too close to bedtime can send conflicting signals. The nervous system needs to feel secure to release its vigil. There is a reason we instinctively reach for comfort food when stressed. Those starchy, familiar foods can trigger serotonin release, which dampens cortisol and whispers all is well to the anxious body. Discipline in eating, therefore, is not synonymous with austerity. It is about intelligent, rhythmic nourishment that supports the entire cycle, the focused push and the deep recovery. We have traveled a considerable distance from the simple command to just do it. We have moved from a model of force to a model of ecology. Building extreme discipline is not about conquering the self. It is about becoming a sophisticated caretaker of a complex, dynamic, living system which is you. It involves listening to the friction, recognizing resistance not as a foe, but as a feature of the landscape, and learning to move through it by linking the action to an immediate internal victory. Stewarding your neurochemistry, protecting your sensitivity by strategically subtracting supernormal stimuli, ensuring your motivation arises from within rather than from external augmentation. Honoring the rhythm, understanding that focused effort and deep rest are not opposites, but partners in a dance. That learning, growth, and consolidation happen in the spaces between the striving, anchoring in biology, respecting the foundational signals of light, darkness, and nourishment that set the stage for all higher cognitive function. This is why this exploration had to be long. The truth of discipline is not a bullet point. It is a symphony with multiple movements. It is a philosophy of the self that replaces conflict with integration and force with understanding. The friction never disappears, but you can learn to move with it, to use its very presence as the traction for your progress. The goal is not to silence the voice that says stay, but to develop a deeper, quieter, more persistent voice that says, I choose to go. And so we arrive at the final, most personal pivot. All of this theory, this science, this philosophy, where does it live? It lives in the silence after this sentence ends. It lives in your next moment of choice. When you feel the pull toward distraction, the weight of procrastination, the seductive comfort of the easier path, you will have a choice. You can revert to the old story, the story of war, of gritted teeth, of forcing yourself through sheer will. Or you can try on the new story. You can pause. You can acknowledge the friction. You can ask yourself, what is the tiny, immediate win of aligning with my deeper intention? Can I feel the satisfaction of that integrity, even now? Can I lower the stimulation, just for now, and listen to what my own mind generates? Can I trust that the rest I need is not a detour from the path, but part of the path itself? The building of a disciplined life is not the construction of a fortress. It is the cultivation of a garden. It requires daily, patient tending. You learn the seasons of your own energy. You pull the weeds of compulsive distraction. You plant the seeds of focused intention, and you understand that the fruit appears not through constant tugging, but through a faith in the process, a respect for the sun and the dark, the effort and the fallow time. You are both the gardener and the garden. The journey is not toward some distant, perfected version of yourself. It is toward a complete and compassionate conversation with the person you are, right now, in this warm bed, in this dark room. At the beginning of a day, you have the profound privilege to shape one conscious, friction-filled, beautiful choice at a time. The extreme discipline was never about being extreme. It was about being whole. And that, perhaps, is the quietest revolution of all.